Hello dear students. So in this particular session we are going to discuss about object-oriented programming versus procedure-oriented programming. So basically, what is exactly the object-oriented programming? What is exactly the procedure-oriented programming? What would be the difference between them? What are the advantages, disadvantages, features? We are going to discuss each and everything related to that in this particular session. So see here, first of all, if we're talking about the procedure-oriented programming, so simply what we can say for the procedure-oriented programming is a programming language that is based on the concept of functions and procedures. Okay, so mainly it is based on the concept of function and the concept of procedure. Okay, so basically what exactly we are doing here, we are going to focus on a step-by-step instructions and routine to perform a particular task. Let's see here, I will give you the just overview how exactly the procedure-oriented programming is going to work. So first of all, here we can say that we need to make a main function. Okay, in a procedure-oriented programming is a function-oriented programming. There are lots of instructions. Definitely there are lots of instructions. We need to execute each instructions one by one. Definitely there is certain function callings. There are certain statements. There is another function calling and so on. Okay, so what we are doing, what will be the code that we are writing? It is a function oriented, it is a procedure oriented. Mainly we are going to focus over the procedure. So step by step we are going to solve the instructions. Whenever there is a function calling, we need to execute that function. So we need to go to the memory area of that particular function and we need to start execution of this particular function. Sometime it may possible that function is going to call some another function. So if it is going to call some another function, you need to go to the definition of that particular function and you need to execute this. After executing this, your focus goes here. Now execute the remaining instruction of that particular function, then goes at that particular location and start execution again. Okay. Now the function 2, so you need to call that particular function, execute all the statement of this function and then you can exit. So that is the way what exactly we are doing in a procedure oriented programming. You can somehow see like this. Supposed to be you are having a main function. That main function is going to call, suppose 3 function inside this. Okay, and supposed to be function 1 is going to call function 4. Function 2 is also going to call function 4. It may possible a particular function is called by some other functions. Now function 2 supposed to be also calling function 5 and function 3 is also calling function 5. Now it may possible function 4 is going to call function 6 and this is also going to call function 6 and so on. So that is exactly what we can say. This is the function oriented programming language and that would be the main structure. First of all, we need to execute the main body. Inside that, if there are multiple functions, so you need to go the top to bottom and left to right approach. Means we need to go from top to bottom. First of all, we are going to execute the left one and then the right one and so on. Okay, so top to bottom, left to right approach we can say. Now see here the features of procedure oriented programming. So code is organized into the function or a procedure. So the important and very important point is what? Here we are organizing our code in the form of functions or in the form of procedures. Okay. Global data is shared among the functions. Means if you are going to make some global variables, so that global variables are shared throughout all the functions. If you are going to make a local variables, so local variables scope is inside the function only. Okay, so that is the point. You just remember this one. It follow the top down approach. That means we need to start from the main function and then we need to go to the subtask, or we can say that we need to go to the sub functions. Okay, so what exactly we are going to emphasize on the algorithm or a logic rather than the data. Means algorithm or logic is somehow we can say it is a set of instructions, set of steps to solve a particular problem. So here we need to emphasize, we need to focus over the algorithm, over the logics. We are not mainly focused over the data. So these are the certain key features of a procedure oriented programming. Let's talk about the procedure oriented programming, how exactly we are going to work. So first of all, what exactly we are doing? We are going to break our problem in a series of tasks, and for each task we are going to make a function. Like in the previous diagram I show you, main function is there and there are total 6 functions. Okay, means there is a single task, but that single task is going to divide into the multiple functions. What are the benefit of this? We can say that with the help of function we can reuse the code Code reusability is also there. Like suppose to be there is a function 6, you need to make a definition of the function 6, and suppose different functions are going to call the function 6. So no need to write the same code again and again. You can directly call that particular function at that particular location. Like you can see here, F4 and F5 both want the definition of F6. So no need to write the definition of F6 two times. Just write down the definition one time and call that F6 function in F4 as well as in F5 like this. Okay. So that's why we can say that this is the approach. So first of all, how exactly it is going to work? First of all, break the problem into the sub problems, or we can say that break the problem into the series of steps. And for each step or for each subtask, you need to make a procedure. Write function to perform each step. What will be the for that? Sharing data using global variables or parameter. We can make a global variable. The variable they are going to create outside of the main body are called a global variable. So you need to make that global variables. Okay. Now, if you're talking about the features, advantages of the procedure-oriented programming. So let's see here. The first advantage of procedure-oriented programming is what? It is simple and easy to implement. Okay. So procedure-oriented programming is simple, easy to implement, efficient when working on a task. If you are going to work on certain task, then it would be best, because for each task you can make a function. Let's, if we're talking about the disadvantage, so first point is difficult to manage large projects. If your project is very large, then it is difficult to manage using the procedure-oriented programming. Second, there is no data security. There is no concept of data security, because we are going to mainly focus over what? Functions. Code reusability is there, but is low, because only the way is function calling. Okay, but there is no concept of object oriented. Object oriented is more code reusability, because there we are going to use the inheritance. There is no concept of inheritance, and not for real world problems. Means is not mainly focus over the real world problems. So this is not for the real world problem. That is also the point. So this is about the procedure oriented programming. You can see the example for the procedure oriented programming. C language is a procedure oriented. Pascal is also procedure oriented. Fortran is also a procedure oriented. Okay, so you just remember that particular point. Now let's try talk about the object oriented programming. So here, rather than the focus over the procedure, now we are going to focus on the object. What is exactly the object? Object is simply instance of a class. Okay, so we can say that it combines the data and behavior into a single unit. Means now we are not only going to work over the procedure, means now we are not only focus on an algorithm, but here we need to focus on the data as well as the function, means data and behavior both into a single unit. So that's why we are going to use the object concept of the object oriented programming. Okay, so here we can say that programs are made up of objects and classes. Classes are what? It simply we can say that we can make a class for any real world entity, like that student. We can make a class for a student, because a student is a real world entity, and a particular student is called an object of that particular class. So object is what? It is simply an instance of a particular class. So we can say that here, whenever we are going to make a project or a program, so we are mainly focus over the data and behavior both, and we are going to make that into a single unit. Now programs are made up of object and classes. Mainly here we are going to use the concepts of encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, data abstraction. Okay, so these are the important point. And this is not a top-down approach like a procedure-oriented programming. This is a bottom-up approach. This is what? It is a bottom-up approach. Here we can say that an object can call another object, an object is related with another object, and we can make that relationship. Okay. Now, data hiding inside the objects and accessible through the methods. So we can hide the data inside the object, and there are different accessible methods, or we can make our data like a public, private and protected. Okay, means suppose you are going to make a certain class, and inside that class you need to make some function as a public or some object as a public. So means anyone can access that particular data. If it is private, means that data is only accessible inside that particular class. Okay, and protected means we can access that data using the friend class or a friend function, like this. Okay, let's see here how exactly it is going to work. So what we can say, it identify the real world entities, real world object, and we can say that key mainly we are going to use to solve the real world problems. Okay, it define classes, means blueprint of object, and implement behavior through the methods. First of all, what to do? You need to identify what are the real world entities, means object. Then you need to define class, means the group of objects. So for that you need to make a class, and then you need to implement that class and the behavior of that particular object through the methods. We need to make a methods inside that. Okay, let's see if we're talking about what are the advantages of procedure oriented programming. So you can what are the advantages of object oriented programming? So first point is code reusability is more. Through inheritance. Okay, so that is the advantage here. Second, there is a data security through encapsulation. This is another important point. Then easy to implement real world problem. Okay, so that is also the point, easy to implement the real world problem. If we're talking about the disadvantage of this particular, what are the disadvantage and the examples of object oriented programming is C++, Java, C#, Python. These all are the, we can say that the programming language, object oriented programming language. If we're talking about the disadvantage, it is more complex. We need to make more logics, more design to implement that. So ultimately we can say that the procedure oriented, as compared to the procedure oriented programming language, object oriented programming language is more complex. Okay, so that would be the point. It is more complex, require good knowledge or good programmer to implement that. Let's see. Here there is a features, and on the basis of that features we are going to differentiate the procedure oriented programming and object oriented programming. So first of all, you can see here the first point is basic concept. So procedure oriented programming is mainly focused over the function and procedure, while object oriented programming is mainly focused over the objects and data. Procedure oriented programming is what it is top down approach, object oriented programming is what it is bottom up approach. If we are talking about the data handling, so data is global and can accessible anywhere in the function. So in procedure oriented programming, we can make a global data and you can access that data throughout the program and in each and every function. Here data is encapsulated within the object and access is restricted. So what will be the data? We are going to encapsulate that data in a object. Okay. If we're talking about the security, so we can say that here security is the concern, less secure because the global data is accessible anywhere. If you're talking about the object-oriented programming, it is more secure because data is hiding and abstraction. Code reusability is limited because we can only use the function, but here high reusability. So we are going to discuss the point that is modularity. So not highly modular, and this is highly modular everywhere inside object. Everything, whatever will be the things, they are going to inside the object. So that's why it is modular. So object oriented programming is modular, while procedure oriented programming is not that much modular. Okay, and we can say that the examples for this is C, Fortran, Pascal. An example for this is C++, Java, Python and C#. Okay, function overloading, operator overloading, inheritance, polymorphism, these all things are not supported by the procedure oriented programming, but they all are going to support by object oriented programming. If you're talking about the real world mapping, so it's very hard to map the procedure oriented programming to the real world, while object oriented programming is, we can say that, used to solve the real world problems. Maintenance, so we can say that for the procedure oriented programming, maintenance is difficult for the larger projects, while if we are talking about the maintenance and update, so that would be easy in a object oriented programming language. Got it? So this is basically the object oriented programming and procedure oriented programming and the difference between them. What are the features of each, advantages, disadvantages, all the things about that. Thank you so much for watching this particular session.